The rain had been falling for hours when Elena Martinez first heard the sound. It was faint at first, barely audible over the steady drumming of water against her apartment window. But there it was again, a weak, desperate crying that seemed to pierce through the storm like a needle through fabric. Eleanor pressed her face against the cold glass, squinting into the dim streetlight below. Her small apartment overlooked one of the quieter streets in the neighborhood, where old brick buildings stood shoulder to shoulder like tired sentinels. She had lived here for many years, working double shifts at the local diner to make ends meet, and she knew every sound this street could make. This was different. The crying continued, and Elena's heart began to race. She grabbed her raincoat and rushed downstairs, her slippers slapping against the wet concrete as she stepped into the storm. The sound was clearer now, coming from the narrow alley between two buildings across. The street. What she found there would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life, but not in the way she expected. Huddled against a pile of soggy cardboard boxes was the smallest baby she had ever seen, wrapped in nothing but a thin blanket that had long since soaked through. The infant's cries were growing weaker, and Elena's nursing instincts kicked in immediately, but as she rushed forward, she stopped short. Sitting protectively over the baby, like a furry guardian angel, was an enormous orange tabby cat. The animal was completely drenched, its fur matted against its body, but it hadn't moved from its post. Its yellow eyes met Elena's with an intensity that made her breath catch. The cat seemed to be saying, "I've been waiting for you." "Oh my God," Elena whispered, dropping to her knees in the puddle-filled alley. "How long have you been here, little one?" The cat stepped aside as if understanding her intentions, allowing Elena to scoop up the shivering infant. The baby couldn't have been more than a few months old, and Elena's heart broke as she felt how cold and fragile the tiny body was against her chest. But the mystery was just beginning. As Elena rushed back to her apartment with the baby, the orange cat followed close behind, as if it had appointed itself as the child's permanent guardian. Once inside, Elena quickly warmed the infant and managed to get some milk into the tiny stomach, while the cat sat vigilantly nearby, never taking its eyes off the baby. It was only when Elena was changing the baby's soaked clothes that she found the note. Tucked into the blanket was a crumpled piece of paper, written in shaky handwriting. "His name is Carlos. Please take care of him. I'll come back when I can, thank you. M." Elena stared at the note for a long time, her mind racing with questions. Who was M? Why had they left this precious child in an alley during a storm? And most puzzling of all, how had that cat known to stay with the baby? The next morning, Elena called the police and social services, but she also made a decision that would change her life forever. She would foster Carlos until his mother returned, and the orange cat, which she named Diego after her late father, would stay too. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Elena threw herself into caring for Carlos with a dedication that surprised even her. She had never thought much about having children of her own, but this little boy awakened something in her she didn't know existed. Diego the cat proved to be an extraordinary companion, seeming to sense when Carlos was hungry, tired, or needed comfort before Elena herself noticed. Carlos grew into a bright, curious toddler with Elena's warm brown eyes and an infectious laugh that could light up any room. Elena officially adopted him when it became clear that M, whoever she was, wasn't coming back. She often wondered about the woman who had made such a desperate choice, but she was grateful every day that Carlos had come into her life. The real mystery began to unfold when Carlos started school. Elena had enrolled him in the local elementary school, the same one she had attended as a child. On the first day, she walked him to his classroom, Diego trailing behind them as usual. The cat had become something of a neighborhood celebrity, known for his unusual intelligence and his unwavering devotion to Carlos. It was Mrs. Patterson, Carlos's teacher, who first noticed something strange. "That's remarkable," she said to Elena during their first parent-teacher conference. "Carlos has an almost uncanny ability to connect with the other children. Just yesterday, he helped little Yasmin find her lost lunch money, and somehow he knew exactly where to look, in a place no one else would have thought to check." Eleanor smiled proudly, but Mrs. Patterson wasn't finished. "And there's something else. He seems to have this intuition about when other children are upset or in trouble. Last week, he insisted that we check on Robert, a quiet boy who rarely speaks up. It turned out Robert was being bullied by older kids, but he hadn't told anyone. Carlos somehow knew. As the school year progressed, more stories emerged. Carlos had a gift for finding lost things and helping people in ways that seemed almost supernatural, if Elena believed in such things. But she was a practical woman who believed in hard work and kindness, not magic. The truth began to reveal itself on a rainy afternoon, much like the one when Elena had first found Carlos. Elena was working her evening shift at the diner when her phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson calling from the school. "Elena, I'm sorry to bother you, but something extraordinary has happened. Carlos is fine, but, well, you need to come to the school, and bring Diego if you can." Elena's heart raced as she drove to the school, Diego sitting calmly in the passenger seat as if he knew exactly what was happening. She found Mrs. Patterson waiting in the parking lot with Carlos and several other teachers. "There's been an accident," Mrs. Patterson explained quickly. "A construction worker fell into an open sewer drain behind the school. The emergency crews have been searching for over an hour, but the drainage system is like a maze down there. They can't find him." Elena was confused. "I don't understand. What does this have to do with Carlos?" Mrs. Patterson glanced at the boy, who was standing quietly beside Diego, both of them looking toward the construction site with intense concentration. "Carlos insists that he knows where the man is. He says Diego told him." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean Diego told him?" "Elena," Carlos said, looking up at her with those familiar brown eyes, "Diego can hear things we can't. He always could. That's how he knew to find me in the alley that night. That's how he always knows when people need help." Before Elena could respond, Carlos was walking toward the construction site, Diego trotting alongside him. The emergency responders tried to stop them, but Elena had a sudden, inexplicable certainty that her son knew exactly what he was doing. Carlos stopped at a seemingly random spot near the school's back fence, far from where the crews had been searching. Diego sat down and began to meow, not his usual gentle purr, but a loud, insistent sound that carried across the construction site. "Down there," Carlos said simply, pointing to a barely visible drain cover hidden beneath a pile of construction debris. "He's hurt, but he's alive." The rescue crews looked skeptical, but something in the boy's quiet confidence convinced them to try. Within minutes they had cleared the debris and opened the drain. The missing worker was indeed there, unconscious but breathing, exactly where Carlos had said he would be. As the paramedics worked to get the man out safely, Elena knelt beside her son, trying to process what had just happened. "Carlos," she said softly, "how did you know?" The boy looked at her with a wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. "Diego always knew things, Mama. That's why he was there that night when you found me. He wasn't just keeping me warm. He was waiting for the right person to come. He was waiting for you." Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. "But how is that possible?" "I don't know," Carlos said honestly, "but I think some animals can sense when people need help. And I think I inherited some of that from spending so much time with Diego when I was little. It's like he taught me how to listen with more than just my ears." Elena looked at Diego, who was sitting calmly beside them, his yellow eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that she had never quite noticed before. Had she been living with a miracle all these years without realizing? The rescued construction worker, whose name was Ivan, made a full recovery. When he was released from the hospital, he came to thank Elena and Carlos personally. He brought with him a surprise that would solve the final piece of the puzzle that had haunted Elena for years. "I wanted to thank you both," Ivan said, sitting in Elena's small living room, while Diego dozed contentedly on Carlos's lap. "But I also wanted to tell you something that might interest you. While I was recovering, I got to talking with one of the nurses. Her name is Mara, and she's been working at the hospital for a long time. When I told her about what happened, about how a young boy and his cat had saved my life, she got very quiet." Elena felt her heart beginning to race. "What did she say?" "She asked me to describe the boy and the cat. When I did, she started crying. She said she thought she might know who Carlos is." Elena's hands were shaking as Ivan continued. "Mara had a baby many years ago, when she was very young and very poor. She was working multiple jobs trying to support them both, but she was failing. Her baby was getting sick because she couldn't afford proper food and medicine. She was desperate." Carlos looked up from Diego, his eyes wide with understanding. "One night, during a terrible storm, she made the hardest decision of her life. She wrapped her baby in the best blanket she had and left him somewhere she hoped someone kind would find him. She put a note with his name, Carlos, and promised herself she would come back when she was able to provide for him properly. Elena felt the world spinning around her. The orange cat. She said there was a cat in the area, a stray that she had been feeding scraps from her dinner. She had prayed that the cat might stay with the baby until someone found him. She never knew if her prayer had been answered. Elena looked at Diego, who seemed to understand every word being spoken. The cat's yellow eyes met hers with that same intense intelligence she had noticed that first night in the alley. "Where is she now?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "She's here," Ivan said gently. "She's outside, in my car. She's been looking for Carlos all these years, working extra shifts to save money, taking classes to become a better nurse. She never stopped hoping she would find him again. But she's also terrified that he won't want to see her, or that his adoptive family won't want her in his life." Elena looked at Carlos, who was quietly petting Diego. "What do you think, sweetheart? Do you want to meet her?" Carlos was quiet for a long moment, and then he smiled. That bright, infectious smile that had been lighting up Elena's life for years. "I think Diego would want me to," he said simply. "He's always been good at knowing when people need help, and I think she needs to know that I'm okay." Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Then let's go meet her." Mara was sitting in Ivan's car, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, when Elena and Carlos approached. She was a small woman with kind eyes and the same warm brown hair as Carlos. When she saw them, she began to cry immediately. The reunion was gentle and careful, filled with tears and tentative smiles. Mara explained that she had indeed been the young mother who had left Carlos in the alley, and that not a day had passed since then, that she hadn't thought about him and wondered if she had made the right choice. "I was so young and so scared," she said, holding Carlos's hands carefully, as if he might disappear. "I thought I was failing you as a mother. I thought you deserved better than what I could give you. But you gave me the best mother in the world," Carlos said, looking at Elena with pure love. "And you made sure Diego was there to protect me until she found me." Mara looked at Diego, who had been sitting quietly throughout the reunion. "I remember you," she said softly. "You were the orange cat I used to feed. I prayed that you would stay with him, and you did." Diego meowed once, softly, as if acknowledging her gratitude. Elena found herself in the unique position of sharing her son with the woman who had given birth to him, but rather than feeling threatened or jealous, she felt only compassion for Mara and gratitude for the choice she had made. Carlos had come into Elena's life at exactly the moment when she needed him most, and now Mara could be part of his life at exactly the moment when she was ready to be the mother she had always wanted to be. The three of them, four, counting Diego, became an unconventional but loving family. Mara had indeed become an excellent nurse, and she used her medical skills to help Elena care for Carlos and to volunteer in their community. Elena continued to work at the diner, but now she had help and support from someone who understood the sacrifices that loving a child required. Carlos continued to grow into a remarkable young man, with an uncanny ability to help others and find solutions to problems that seemed impossible. He never knew if his gift came from Diego's early influence, from some genetic trait inherited from his mother's, or simply from being raised with so much love and attention to the needs of others. Diego lived for many more years, continuing to watch over Carlos and his extended family, with the same devotion he had shown that first night in the alley. When he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep, Carlos was a teenager, and the whole neighborhood mourned the loss of their guardian cat. But Diego's legacy lived on in Carlos, who grew up to become a social worker specializing in helping children in difficult situations. He had a talent for finding children who had been overlooked by the system and connecting them with families who could love them. He never forgot the lesson that both of his mothers and his feline guardian had taught him, that sometimes the most profound acts of love require tremendous courage, and that the right help often comes from the most unexpected places. Elena often thought about that rainy night when she had first heard Carlos crying in the alley. She realized that in saving him, she had actually saved herself. Her life had been lonely and purposeless before Carlos arrived, but becoming his mother had given her a reason to be the best version of herself. Mara often said that leaving Carlos had been both the hardest and the bravest thing she had ever done. It had motivated her to become the person she needed to be, not just for herself, but for the son she hoped to see again someday. When that day finally came, she was ready to be the mother Carlos deserved, working alongside Elena to give him all the love and support he needed. And Carlos learned that families come in all shapes and sizes, that love multiplies when it's shared rather than divided, and that sometimes the most important guardian angels have 4 legs, orange fur, and the wisdom to know exactly when to wait and when to act. The story of the baby who cried alone in the street, protected by a faithful cat until the right person noticed, became a legend in their neighborhood. But for Elena, Mara, and Carlos, it wasn't a legend at all. It was simply the beginning of a beautiful, complicated, and perfectly imperfect family story that proved that love, like hope, has a way of finding exactly where it needs to go. Years later, when Carlos told this story to children in the foster care system, he always ended with the same message. Sometimes it takes more than one person to make a family, and sometimes it takes more than one kind of love to heal a heart. But if you're patient and kind and willing to listen, really listen, you'll find that there are guardian angels everywhere, just waiting for the right moment to change your life forever. And in the back of the room, if you looked carefully, you might notice an orange cat that looked remarkably like Diego, sitting quietly and watching over the children with the same intelligent yellow eyes, as if the spirit of protection and love that had started this whole story was still working its magic in the world, one rescued heart at a time. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the world of captivating stories. I trust you found today's narrative as engaging as I did. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.